The water appears calm from the surface, but what is under these waters is causing a stir among fishing groups in New South Wales. This is Barrenjoey Headland, a popular fishing spot for many of the state's 1 million anglers, and a feeding ground of the native Australian salmon. In the winter months, anglers flock to these waters to watch the salmon boil on the surface and never leave disappointed.
They fight so hard. They're amazing fighting fish. You can pursue them on surface lures and flies, so that they'll strike off the surface, which is very exciting. And as a bread and butter species, they really are everything the sport fisherman really wants to pursue, except they're not great on the table.
Unlike most fish species in New South Wales, Australian salmon does not end up on the dinner table. In fact, it ends up dead in bait traps at the bottom of the ocean, being used to catch other species. The New South Wales government has recently overturned a decade-long ban that stopped commercial fishermen from catching Australian salmon north of Barrenjoey. This decision means commercial fishermen can take 3 tonnes of Australian salmon per licence holder per day. Justin Duggan is the only fly fishing guide in Sydney and runs a business that relies on the presence of salmon in the waters.
I can honestly say if we didn't have Australian salmon surface schools and the Australian salmon in the Broken Bay and Sydney Harbour areas, or especially Broken Bay, if we didn't have those surface schools there, I could probably say most of my bookings would dry up between probably June and September.
You get all the salmon, you know, you get the salmon, the bonito, the kings, all working on this bait, but we just got to find the salmon. That's the hard part.
Al McGlashan is a 37-year-old father of 2 who spends more than 200 days a year on the water. He is concerned that the reliable Australian salmon will be absent from the waters when they need them most. That is, when no other fish are feeding.
Come on, salmon, one more shot. One shot. Any shot. Their biological, their seasonal clocks told them to go, and they're saying, I think I'm staying here for a bit longer and stuff, you know. So, yeah, and they're almost now to the point where they're, well, at the moment they seem to be a year-round thing, which is, you know, sensational.
And I miss them a lot when they're not around. At the moment there's a few, but my customers generally love chasing Australian salmon because they just fight so hard. They're a wonderful species, good-looking fish.
The department claims that both recreational and commercial fishermen from New South Wales were consulted prior to the decision, but this is contested by recreational fishermen in the south of New South Wales, who say that only a small group of New South Wales fishermen were consulted. These fishermen see salmon as a pest because they believe it eats juvenile sports fish like bream, whiting and mulloway. But Julian Hughes, who is a scientist with the DPI, found that the pest status of Australian salmon is not supported by science.
Part of the driver for the funding for the project was to look at whether they do actually have an impact on commercially important species, juveniles of commercially important species. And we certainly didn't find any evidence of that at all.
The case was there was a very small vocal minority of recreational fishermen who, for whatever reason, have it in their head that these Australian salmon are doing damage. Once that gets into the psyche of the minister or into decision groups, that the recreational sector as well as the commercial sector are calling for salmon to be netted, all of a sudden you think, oh, there's a consensus amongst recreational and commercial fishermen for salmon to be netted. The problem is that wasn't the case.
Consultation needs to be across the whole state. Salmon run the whole state, so just taking the opinions of some people who tagged salmon as the rabbit of the sea, right, many years ago, and we went through the process of trying to work out what the research the animal to work out what they were feeding on.
And so it goes against the science. It goes against the science that these fish are wiping out massive bait fish stocks up and down the coast. It goes against what has been found, yet they're using the science to now go and basically net these salmon. I think it's just really out of balance that the Australian salmon is somehow some sort of ferocious predator that eats everything.
With no scientific support for the decision, Minister Katrina Hodgkinson, who refused to be interviewed, is being accused of having only political motivations.
The North Coast are quite powerful as a commercial fishery, and she seems to just bow to their every demand, you know, to Bruce and the blokes up there. So I'm not quite sure, but there's a lot of there's a lot of questions around why it's being done and why they wanted to push it through.
I don't see any benefit in removing 3 tonnes of Australian salmon per endorsement per day for trap bait. So where are the Greens on this?
If the recreational fishers are calling on the Greens to have a look at the salmon catch, they're probably doing that to divert our attention away from trying to get these 1,500 metre sanctuary zones around what are some of their popular fishing spots. Sounds a little bit political to me.
The decision has caused fishing groups in New South Wales to turn against each other, as their interests are bargained for by the New South Wales government. Meanwhile, as commercial fishermen begin to exploit an iconic Australian sports fish, the only thing recreational fishermen can do is wait and see if Australian salmon will be there next year.